Karen,
Yes.
imagine spending 3 years living with Bushman healers in the Kalahari and yogis in the mountains of India.
Mm-hmm.
Then imagine being caught living in a cave during the beginnings of COVID.
Ooh,
Now, what would these things possibly have in common, you might ask?
I do ask
Well, I'm
that.
glad you asked, because it just so happens that this is precisely what our next guest experienced. Now, living in a cave is not his only claim to fame. He's also had shamanic training and ritual work. He studied with noted gurus. He's fasted in the mountains for 34 days.
Ooh,
In short, he's really dedicated his life to the spiritual path.
it sounds like it.
And today, he's coming to us with a very important message. Can you guess what that is?
I have no idea, but I'm dying to find out.
Well, how can you be sure you aren't being manipulated or lied to on the spiritual path?
Ooh, by like another spirit?
We're going to get some no-nonsense tips on how to do that from him, but we're also going to chat about how you can rid yourself of any soul contracts that might exist. This is going to be a fun one.
Well, I can't wait to hear about the cave.
My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
so we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something
Anything.
that will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians.
Welcome to the Skeptic Metaphysicians. I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
And today we've got Michael Falcone in our studio. Now, you might remember him as the American who was caught living in a cave at the very beginning of the COVID pandemic. But what you don't know is how much work he's put into his own spiritual growth. And he's going to let us in on the secret to identifying whether someone in the spiritual field might really be trying to help you or not. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Everything that you mentioned, like the fasting in the wilderness and stuff like that, those were all kind of tests. And so when you said earlier, how to make sure you're not being lied to, I'm actually talking not lied to from a physical being sitting in front of you that's trying to milk you of your money and stuff. I'm talking about, dreams, intuition, messages that are coming
I was right.
to
I'm
you.
sorry.
So
I'm just rarely right. So woohoo!
that is so much better than I thought it was.
Yes.
So yeah, well, okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, then in that case, let's go ahead and start at the very beginning. How did you get to, I want to grow spiritually?
What drove me to finding the spiritual path was a completely broken heart.
A broken
Right.
heart. Wow.
So I was dropping weight for no reason. Like I was eating, but I was basically kind of sick. Apparently in the medical field, it is actually a thing. Like, your heart breaks and it does have health ramifications. And I really needed healing. And obviously a medical doctor wasn't going to be able to help with this particular problem. So I got a healing from like a Qigong master, which kind of helped a little bit, but it didn't really get everything done. And I ended up contacting and working with a shaman that I kind of just found online and was like, all right, I don't know what else to do.
So you were just kind of Google searching some ways to get help, because how do you go from a regular doctor to a Qigong master? It's like, that's not just like a next step sort of thing. Did someone talk to you about this stuff, or was it just you searching and searching?
I had a friend at work that was really into Qigong, so he led me to that.
Okay.
From there, like I said, it was just a lot of searching. And one thing this man that I worked with will tell people that he works with is to knock on a lot of doors before you find what works for you.
That's very true.
Basically, that's really been my story for a long time, is knocking on a lot of doors. And before I found what I thought was, okay, the path I'm supposed to be on, and I'm going to Africa and India and all that. So
Did you find what you were looking for? So you studied with this shaman, you participate in these rituals. Was shamanism what was calling to you? Because the shaman path and the gurus in India, for example, very different paths.
Mm-hmm.
How did those cross? How did you get to where you were now?
During that time, one of the shamans that I was working with would also say, well, in our society, you really can't just be a shaman. You need something that is kind of your foundation, So for example, if I was a doctor, I can say, oh, I'm, Michael Falcone, a doctor, and I'm also a shaman. So people take me seriously, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
During the beginning of this journey, I actually joined the military. I was discharged for a condition existing prior to service because of my finger. Because the radio listeners won't be able to see that, but one of my fingers is messed up. The ring finger, one of the tendons is messed up. But anyways, after I was discharged from the military, and I was very depressed. I had re-entry depression is something that one of the shamans told me I kind of had. You spend a month in the wilderness or you spend a month in, this or that, and you come back to reality, quote unquote, the real world where you have to find a job and all that. And you're depressed because, you don't know what to do and nothing feels quite right. So during this time, I just tried a very basic, simple meditation. And that meditation, I don't know, I guess I got it really right, but it just opened my heart completely. And I was kind of sitting there, hating myself and wishing something that would happen that would get me out of this mess. Instead, an incredible wave of peace came over me. And the thought that came to me or kind of washed over me was that I would not make any more decisions based on what I thought others needed. And so that maybe is really the beginning of this transitioning over to the yogic path of the tiger, where you're basically on your own from the shamanic.
Then felt the need to go to India and study out there.
Well, right after this kind of awakening experience, obviously personally, everything changed. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it. But this is when Mahavatar Babaji came to me in a very vivid dream and didn't necessarily tell me to come find him. But, I had a couple of dreams about it. And then I had Autobiography of a Yogi sitting in my garage, went out, picked it up, and happened to turn to the page where he's talking about who the Babaji is. And I kind of threw the book out of my hands. I was like, oh my God, that's him. And so from that point, I started making plans, saving money. I was going to go to India, starting in Africa, actually with the Bushman, because that was always kind of on my bucket list, I guess. I don't remember why that was always kind of first on the list, but
how was the reception when you went to Africa and India and you said, hey, I'm here to study with y'all? You look very different than the Bushmen and the Indian gurus. So were you accepted right away? Was it difficult? What was that experience like?
That was not so difficult. The Africa story is really, so I spent my first 2 or 2.5 weeks in Africa waiting on new bank cards because I had been mugged and choked unconscious in Johannesburg.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And so it really wasn't going smoothly.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
But so I flew from Johannesburg to Windhoek, and I met someone on couch surfing up in the north of Namibia that turned out to be missionaries in Bushman land. And when I got there, 8 Bushmen were staying with them, learning, about the Bible and this and that. Mm-hmm. And I said to one of them, oh, I'm looking for Kuntabu, who's the name of a Bushman I had, a very famous healer. And he said, yeah, he's from my village. So when a couple of days later, I traveled with them in a pickup truck out to their village. I'm obviously paraphrasing a little bit, but ever since I was mugged, this just flowed unbelievably smoothly.
Well, I was going to say, you've got some unbelievable courage. Not just to just get in the back of a pickup truck with a bunch of Bushmen and go out to who knows where, but also the story you sent me with the article, you actually you went along with some dude in Nepal who could very easily have absconded with you and everything that there is about you, and you never are heard from again. So I commend you for your courage, but also, whoa, how were you not worried at all? You not think of yourself, could potentially be in danger here?
I was ready to give my life for this. I was in trouble quite a few times.
I bet.
I got lost in the mountains at times. I was out in the bush with the Bushmen and had hardly any food or water and stuff like that. But the main point, I guess, is once this awakening happened and this was the path, that's how strongly I felt that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was...
So you were willing to take any risks necessary because you knew this is where you had to be.
Right. And as long as they were kind of on that path, right? So not necessarily careless risks.
Well, yeah.
But yeah. Right. Risks that I thought were necessary or, to get where I had to go. And if I thought I was in the right place, I could not be dissuaded. And one example would come up in one of the villages I was staying at in India. one thing that people maybe don't know about India, once you get to near the Chinese border and you're a lone foreigner, everyone is very worried about you. You know, it's not going to look good if a foreigner dies in the mountains of India. So at some point, these policemen were at this one village, and they were asking, they saw me and they were like, okay, where are your papers? Where's your permission? Who's responsible for you? And that was a common theme for me in India, was who's responsible for you? You know, and as an American, it's kind of like, you know, what are you talking about? I'm an adult. I'm responsible for myself. But in India, it's not like that. And so there were definitely times also, aside from the physical danger, was you should not be here. You know, what are you doing here? Blah, blah, blah.
Well, we're just getting started. We need to take a break. But when we come back, we are going to get into the nitty of the interview. Specifically, how can you be sure you're not being manipulated or lied to on the spiritual path? How you can get rid of soul contracts that can exist. And of course, the story of the cave. When we come right back. And we're back. Today we've got Michael Falcone on the show. He is a gentleman who has thrown himself into wild and woolly adventures in the path of enlightenment, including being found in a cave right as the COVID pandemic was first starting. We talked a lot about how you started going down this path. And now I'd like to take it to the meat of the interview. You mentioned that you knew of a way that you could be sure that you weren't manipulated or lied to on the spiritual path, and not about Joe Schmo who wants to take you $20 on a tarot reading. You're talking about how you can be sure that beings that you encounter on the spiritual path aren't leading you astray.
Yeah. In all of this backstory that I've just told, really the whole time I was being lied to. So that is,
being lied to by whom?
My dreams. Mahavatar Babaji is the name that is incorrect. The real name is Shiva. And this also came in the form of shamanic dreams, intuition. And if I had to talk about the dreams that I've had on this path, and part of any good lie, right, is a lot of it is true. So a lot of the dreams that I would have are very accurate or prophetic or whatever else. But the end line goal was, in fact, a lie. And just, I guess, to give the punchline, how I got rid of all this, far too late for me, was using ritual medicine that I have from Africa, from an initiated shaman, which is actually to dissolve these contracts. And I found a couple of other people online talking about this, that when a human being incarnates onto Earth, we come in faced with the head archon or Satan or whatever you want to call him, and
so technically an archon is a false angel, right?
I believe so. I mean, I'm not. The crazy thing about this is that I'm not the first. I don't think. The part of the confirmation I got for this soul contract thing is I don't know if you've heard of J. Krishnamurti.
Sure.
So J. Krishnamurti was raised, I think was brought around and nurtured by early women associated with the Theosophical Society. And one day he's the head of this order that they created and things like that. And he gives a speech saying, I'm dissolving this order, humanity needs to be free. And the follow-on organization to the Theosophical Society was the Summit Lighthouse, led by Claire Prophet. And they're all about connecting with ascended masters and all this stuff. One that they follow very closely is Master Kuthumi. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. But then he says in his channeled messages to members that the soul enters thousands of contracts before it enters onto this earth. And so basically what I did was dissolve those, and all the things that were happening to me, most of them very, very bad towards the end, stopped. I haven't talking mostly about the good stuff for now. The end of the story was quite a nightmare for me. But
before we go any further, I want to take just a step back and say, how did you find out you were being lied to? Like what led you to just stop believing this was the right path for you? How did you know that you needed to dissolve these contracts?
Oh, man. Okay. So this is a long story. Most of the time, things were very, very good for me. There were times in the mountains, I hadn't drank in 3 years. I didn't eat meat for 3 years. I was very disciplined. And there were sometimes I felt so good that I just felt like celebrating. Like if I had a glass of wine, I would take a drink just to celebrate how happy I was. And a lot of the tests that I was put through, say, for example, the fasting in the wilderness test, I failed it, so I know that was my fault. And I came back from the mountains down to Rishikesh. And there were all sorts of times like that where, I kind of knew like the tests I was being put through and the messages and things that were being sent to me. And I always kind of knew what I was doing wrong or like what I messed up. Then at some point, Babaji / whoever else was involved in this started manipulating things for me to get together with a woman. And one thing I've learned, by the way, is that these archons, whatever they are, nothing attracts their attention more than relationships. And so now the test was to be with this woman as opposed to him. Like, so getting together with this woman, and then we would both kind of be disciples of Babaji. At some point, I failed in this endeavor to the point where she left. We were both in Rishikesh. She took off with friends into the mountains, herself. And I said, you know what? It's either with her or I'm done. I failed, You involved someone else. And at that point, I realized I was being lied to about things that were going on. A lot of the tests I was being sent were just complete nonsense. And I know a lot of this is hard to imagine, but when I say tests, I'm talking about, say, if I went to sleep at, say, 8 o'clock, having dreams from 8 in the morning until 6 a.m. about, what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to go, meditation, this and that. In addition to visions during the day while I was awake, messages coming intuitively. And at this point, I knew I could kind of gather, that things were not right. And once I started to disobey, so actually disobeying these messages is what made me realize, whoa, this is really wrong. Because this being, now it's angry and vengeful and spiteful. It's like having, instead of, pleasant dreams and good feelings, all of a sudden it's like I have something in my dreams that's just very, very angry.
Let me just make sure I'm following. When you started on the spiritual path, you were getting dreams. And you started, I guess, devoting your path towards this particular entity, this being.
Well, I thought that I was in pursuit of an ascended man, someone like, say, a Buddha or a Jesus.
Okay.
And I don't think that is the case at all. I don't think this was an actual person.
This turned out to be a being who then became very angry when you decided to turn your back on it.
Yeah.
So my question would be, what was the point of that being sending you these dreams or lying to you about a particular path? Is it you just got energy from being a disciple of his?
Well, that really is the $1 million question, because I'm pretty much a nobody. I hold absolutely no real world power. So which is another reason I think these are not, in fact, physical beings, because otherwise, surely a physical being would have something better to do than mess with me. But again, if you look at the Krishnamurti story, what he was supposed to be was the vehicle for the Lord Maitreya to enter the world. And so that's kind of what I believe, is I was supposed to be the vehicle for Shiva to enter the world. That's speculation. I'm not sure what else would make sense for why he would care so much
right
about someone like me.
So then how does someone watch out for that? How can someone, you hear a lot about the New Age movement and meditations and all that, this 5D consciousness, ascension, all this that we're all waking up to. How can you tell when you're being led astray, first? And second, how do you prevent it from happening?
Or stop it once it's started?
Well, my recommendation would be is if you are being sent dreams, that come true, or about other people, or you feel like you really are in, connection with, otherworldly entities, do these rituals first. Make sure that there are no contracts that allow you to be led astray, lied to, or manipulated. So I would do that as a baseline, which is why, and one thing for me on the spiritual path is if I came across a piece of truth or something that really needed to be shared, I have to share it. For example, if I was sent a dream for someone else, it was my responsibility to relay that. And so that's really why I've decided to, do podcasts, is to, well, I mean, I don't know how many people are ever going to hear this message, but I feel like I'm somewhat responsible knowing this to at least get it out there.
Sure, sure. So then how does someone move forward on this path without fear? Like, how do you open your heart to these kinds of things? How do you let Jesus or Buddha or whatever into you, knowing that there are these entities out there?
Well, I think how I want to answer that is that what you want to do is open your heart so that the same spirit of Jesus is embodied through you. Now, I mean, if that does mean to you that I need to literally let the spirit of a being called Jesus into my heart, then like I say, I would still at least do these rituals to make sure as that process is happening, like nothing malevolent can come in, certainly not contractually. And if things do come in, there are usually ways to get them out or mitigate what's happening to you. But in the case of Jesus or Buddha, as I say, I would more advocate for what you're doing is trying to open your own heart and embody, kind of the Jesus consciousness through your heart.
So I'm assuming these medicines you keep talking about is the way for you to cancel these soul contracts that we have been talking about.
Yeah. And I will say that I've come across a couple of people that have meditation protocols for this that, I assume take a number of weeks or months. This was me having this very powerful spirit medicine was kind of a shortcut. Got it done pretty quickly. And as I mentioned before, I don't know if you caught it, but I got this medicine from an initiated shaman. So in other words, this medicine comes from someone with a soul contract, in essence, to act as a shaman, to dispose medicine, to, interpret dreams, whatever the case may be. So in other words, he is contracted.
He's legit.
He's legit, right.
Right.
So in other words, if I found the same medicine, now I am on the spiritual crap list, so I could never be.
Thanks for changing the name of the list to crap.
Yeah, I mean, I really am. So I could never be a shaman TM or whatever.
Now,
so
is it because of them or because of you? Because I would say don't cut yourself out, right? Don't cut yourself short, because anyone can change. Anyone can make themselves better than what they were before.
Well, having this contract to be a shaman through these contracts, I can't have that. I've cut the contract thing out. And the second thing is, for as much as my life has, gotten better and a lot of the attack that was happening to me has gone away, my dreams, 100% of my dreams for the past 2 years have all been still nightmares, and clearly not my own, clearly sent from, as I say, these beings are extremely vindictive. They do not forget. I am on the crap list. That is one thing I have not been able to change. So,
well, you know what they say, health has no fury like a scorned spiritual being. So yeah, I can imagine they can make your life a little difficult if you cross them.
Yeah.
Kind of scary.
Now, so my background is I'm Hispanic. So in my culture, we have like curanderos, which you can go and get something like this kind of cleansed out of you. Have you considered doing something like that to get this thing off your back?
So as I say, like all of that is gone, and I can very firmly distinguish what's me and what isn't. So like I say, the only thing that remains is the dreams. And I don't really know why. I don't know how I could possibly get rid of that. I also don't know how that's possible to be sent dreams like this, but I don't know if anyone really knows the physics of it, how that's actually possible. But another thing, so this Master Kuthumi, as he's talking through members of the Summit Lighthouse, will say if you are a true initiate or a true candidate to be, whatever, electrodes are placed in your field or your aura. And I have no idea what he means by electrodes, but that's the language that he uses. And that's literally what it felt like. I don't know if you're familiar. I mean, there's a lot of ways actually I can kind of describe using movies or what it was like for me. But you've seen the cartoons with, you've got like an angel on your one shoulder and a little devil on the other.
Yep. Story of my life.
Well, they say in India, I can't remember which shoulder it is, but they say Shiva, sits on one of your shoulders. And that's really what it was like. It was mostly like someone around me or behind me a lot of the time. And then when things were very bad, I don't know if you saw X-Men Apocalypse.
I'm a big comic book fan. So, yep, I've seen them all.
Well, do you remember when Apocalypse was trying to take over the consciousness of Charles Xavier? That's what the bad times were like for me, like something was trying to take me over like that. I was always still there. Like this me in front of you was always still here, just with something trying to take it over.
That sounds awful.
You've mentioned Shiva a few times, and the Shiva that I know about is known as the destroyer in Hindu tradition, but also the supreme lord that creates, protects, transforms the universe, like a god. But you're kind of making that being out to sound much more like a devil than a god. Is that your intent?
Yeah. And very, well, as I say, vindictive, jealous, definitely jealous. Jealousy is often a big theme when you're talking about gods, I feel like, from whatever culture. But jealous, vindictive. And also another thing that led me to believe that these are not physical entities is kind of stupid. Also. And what I mean by that, I can describe this to you in comic book terms as well. Have you seen The Watchmen?
Oh, yeah. Love The Watchmen.
Well, so Dr. Manhattan, he undergoes that radioactive accident and he becomes this kind of, I don't know, fourth or fifth dimensional being, but he kind of loses touch with humanity and reality. And he becomes kind of morally questionable, when he kills Rorschach at the end. And so when I say these beings are stupid, they're stupid in a way that is, if you didn't have a three-dimensional body, if you didn't have consequences for your actions.
So I would say that maybe instead of calling a all-powerful being stupid, maybe naive might be a better term to throw around
make
there.
him more mad.
Yeah, sorry.
Naive or
ego-driven.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not. I mean, maybe partially ego-driven, but I think Sorry.
Even ignorant might be better than stupid. I mean, it just feels like you're poking the bear a little too much.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I guess there might be a little bit of leftover.
Sure.
Bitterness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when I think about all this fifth dimensional stuff and 3D reality and what we're doing here and all the ramifications of that, I think this 3D reality really enables a lot of we are capable of a huge spectrum of emotion, incredible reasoning and thought processes because we live, we're having to eat and, go to the bathroom and, make money and this and that. There are very real consequences to our actions. And so I think if, say I were to undergo a radioactive experiment and become a fifth dimensional being that, okay, better than stupid. Yeah, right. I would lose touch with that reality.
There you go.
But I think also lose touch with what it's like to be in that reality, what it's like for other people. So maybe that means a loss of empathy. Maybe in some situations, it also means a desire. Like, let's say, you've read a drug trip about someone that is completely egoless and is really just looking for, how do I get back to that 3D grounded reality? Mm-hmm. So if you're in a situation like that, after undergoing this radioactive experiment, what would you become or what would you lose? And that, I think these beings that we're talking about, because they are not grounded in a 3D reality and part are jealous of it. Jealous is definitely the right word in this case. Mm-hmm. Perhaps seeking to return to it. And as I said before, nothing seems to attract their attention more than relationships. One thing we learned from the Bible is the fallen angels came down to earth because women were so beautiful.
I mean, not a lie.
Yeah, it's not a lie.
They are.
But yeah, so I think their desire, for a 3D reality from whatever state that they're in has lost a lot in that transition, and whatever caused that transition, I'm not sure.
Really super interesting thought process and conversation. But now we got to get to the nitty, right? The question that opened the entire episode. How did you get into that damn cave?
Okay, so I mentioned before that I failed the test in the mountains fasting because on day 34, a group of geologists came over the ridge and they offered me a bunch of food, and I ate a bunch of food.
Because you were hungry.
I mean, 34 days, that's a win to me.
That's a lot of days.
A lot of days.
Yeah. Anything over a day is a win to me.
How long was it supposed to be?
Part of the messages coming to me were that this happened, by the way, on 6/6, which I thought, okay, this is the day of the beast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my birthday was 6/10. So I kind of had like a premonition that it's supposed to last until 6/10. But of course, it ended on 6/6. So there was no.
You're 4 days away.
Gosh, so close.
Well, and I've often wondered too, like, what if I ever succeeded on this path? What if it's almost, by the way, I failed so many times. It's almost as if something was keeping me from.
It's like two things. You won by losing.
Yeah.
Right? And also it sounds like someone or something was watching over you, making sure you did win by losing. Right. So as much as we're talking about these beings, as selfish beings, you gotta think there's something else out there too that's not quite so petty.
Oh, well, I mean, I could also very easily say at this point that I think it would be very hard to live without faith of something in this universe, being as fragile as we are in this 3D reality, eating and having to go to the bathroom and all this, and the power that I've seen that can be wielded over us. Like I say, I think it would be very hard to live without faith. Anyway, so I also was sent on a pilgrimage through the mountains. That was 3 months walking from Ladakh to Kedarnath, where I was mostly alone going through high mountain passes and stuff like that. And when I got to Kedarnath, I was supposed to meet him up at a lake in the mountains, and I was supposed to wait. Again, kind of this waiting game, fasting. Snowstorm moved in. I left. I failed.
I mean, it's cold.
Yeah.
You lived.
It was cold.
That's a win to me.
So, anyway, after I failed the fasting test, there were a whole bunch of different tests. I'm getting the chronology a bit mixed up. I came down to Rishikesh again with a mind that maybe, what am I going to do now? Because winter's coming. And I had gone to Nepal, a couple of winters before, because you can't really be in the mountains in India in the winter. My visa was expiring. So I needed a place to hang out in Nepal. That's why I found the house for 6 months. As I was in Rishikesh, wondering what the heck to do, the message came that you are a disciple of Mahavatar Babaji. He's accepted you. Now all that there is to meet him, and the masters of light and darkness are going to play a game of chess that you have to win.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm out.
So and describing just even a single night during this time of what was happening to me and how, the energy and everything, I probably couldn't do it. But so this game was every night and every morning, and I failed every morning, by the way. So once again, it's like almost not possible to fail as much as I did. And then, of course, this is going into 2020, and March comes around. COVID is kind of, I'm kind of aware of it from the newspapers and stuff. But the police come around to hotels and guest houses saying, do not take any more people. We don't want people traveling from out of state. Right. And I was the only guest in my guest house. So on, March 18th or something, I went to re-up my stay, and they said, you can't stay here anymore. The police are on our back or whatever. So I just started, I was living outside, basically sleeping on the ghats by the Ganga, and happened to meet a couple of other people that were in a similar kind of situation. Like I said, the guest houses wouldn't take anyone else. So I couldn't find another place to stay. So there were initially about 9 of us that moved out to this cave / the beach of the river. So, and we were, by the way, we were pretty good out there. We were having a good time. We didn't want to be found. I mean, we were 99% outside, bathing in the river and cooking our own food. And
really isolated. You were isolated, so you were safe from the virus at
Yeah.
that point.
pretty isolated. Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of us would walk to town every morning, buy some food and come back. But yeah, pretty isolated.
So when they found you, they said, "What are you doing here? What happened? Did they then charge you with a crime, or did they send you home? What happened after that?"
They didn't charge us with a crime. They probably would have liked to. As I said, one of the top brass in the police, looked at me, pretty angry and was like, "Who will be responsible for you?" And, once again, like I said, a foreigner dying on the beach of the Ganga would not look very good. They didn't want that. So they just quarantined us. It was supposed to be for 2 weeks. We ended up being there for 3, I guess. They just didn't know what to do with us, really. So, and kind of locked us in there and forgot about us.
Now, when you reemerged, were you shocked at how bad it actually was everywhere?
No. No. So India was divided into red, green, and orange zones, I think. And I was in a green zone. So we were moved to another ashram after that, and we were pretty much free to come and go. And I had been used to living in mountains and caves, so my life wasn't much different. I just kind of went for walks, down to where we had been staying before, and things were fairly open. They weren't completely open, but they didn't seem very bad where I was. So I never really experienced COVID. I kind of feel left out.
No, you did not miss anything. No worries. All right, Michael, thanks so much for coming on and telling us your story. This has been fascinating.
So interesting.
If anyone wanted to reach out to you and contact you, we're going to go ahead and put your social media links on our show notes. Your story is fascinating and one that I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to resonate with. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming along on this journey of discovery with us. We'd love to continue our conversation with you on our website at skepticmetaphysician.com or on Facebook and Instagram under Skeptic Metaphysician Podcast. If you know someone who would benefit from hearing the messages we're sharing on the show, do them and us a favor and share the show with them. It will help get the word out about us, and it may just change someone's life for the better. And if you're listening to this on the radio and you missed something, well, not to worry. All of our shows, including this one, can be found at skepticmetaphysician.com, where you can also watch the videos or even send us an email or voicemail directly from the site. We absolutely love feedback and would appreciate hearing from you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have. That's all for now. We'll see you on the next episode of The Skeptic Metaphysicians. Until then, take care.